I'm wondering, having done a Tarantino script, the True Romance, then working with him, it's a big difference between doing it, being directed by somebody else, and being directed by him. What was that like?
It's good fun. I mean, as you can imagine, he's about as knowledgeable of cinema as anyone you run into, and that's infused into the day's work. But the set is church. He is God. The script is Bible. And no heretics allowed.
That's true. I like that. I like that. I'm going to use that one, too.
Did you feel
I'm going to put that in my routine.
Well, I'll tell you what I was most impressed about. Because the script was so tight and so good, and yet Quentin wasn't precious about it like I would expect going into it. Not that we changed anything, but when it got to a certain point in near the end of the film, and we had the luxury of shooting a sequence, he started slashing and burning his own script and redirecting things and condensing things to keep the movement. And I was seeing working that he was so light on his feet that way, especially with his own material. You talked about when we started about the arduous longevity of Grindhouse and how it just zapped the energy, and that you wanted to go in, we're going in 6 weeks, we're going to start shooting, and we're going to go at this pace, and we're going to get it done, and I really want to rely on decisions I have to make, I'm forced to make on the fly. And I thought there was a really interesting, gutsy approach, especially when there's so much now attached to the Tarantino name and so much expectation that's going to come with it. And I thought it was really a bold attack of the film, and in the end, you were right that there is a certain energy and certain things happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Well, it's one of those things where the cast was, the whole crew, they were really great. They really rose to the occasion. It was a situation. If we had 3 days to do a scene, there was no manana, which happens all the time. All right, there wasn't manana. It was like we had 3 days to do it. The tough part about that, you shoot a scene, you have a big scene to do in 3 days, and okay, so you do it, all right? It means you're probably going to go late on that last day, all right? Well, okay, that was hard and that was tough, but we did it. But at the same time, maybe I can feel a little sense of accomplishment on the ride home, but I'm back at it again the very next day. That's the whole shoot. Everything was getting everything done without any spillover to an extra day. Now, if the scene didn't work, then obviously we're going to make it work. But if we kept doing that, then we wouldn't have made Con, and everything would have been like it normally is. You know, fat kind of just starts marbling. You know, if you shoot a scene normally, you know, and you do roll over the next day, well, then it's not so bad. You try to finish up by lunch, and you come up with a bunch of other BS after lunch to fill out your day. Well, that's a very comfortable way of working. But comfortable is not always what's best.
Were you surprised by that? Because it sounds like
Yeah,
what
I
you're
was
saying,
surprised.
it took on its own life, the
I
whole
was
shooting
surprised.
process.
I mean, that takes a lot of confidence in what you're doing, and confidence in your own experience and knowledge of film and decision-making process.
But I like that kind of stuff. I'm a very big believer in, look, I can write a scene and I can be precious about it. I can write a scene 10 years ago, like I did with the Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Those were in 10 years ago. And now I'm doing it. But like, okay, say we go to do Brad's bit, interrogating Sergeant Rockman, and we say we're shooting that on Wednesday. It doesn't matter that I wrote it 10 years ago. Wednesday is what's important. How do we feel today? We're here today. How do we feel today? That's got to be part of it, or else what the hell are you doing?
I want to ask you about your characters, Aldo Ranks, which says you're the only person who stays true to your mission throughout the entire movie, of all the people in the movie. Everybody else is sort of acting as something else. They become something else. They kind of get done in because they're switching the tables so much. Aldo kind of stays the same guy from the beginning to the end.
Well, you know, one of the things is, actually Elvis brought that up because every character in this movie, with the exception of Aldo, is pretending to be people they're not, or playing a different role as far, with a Shoshana or anybody. But actually, Aldo is incapable of being anybody other than Aldo. He tries his best. He's not throwing it away. He thinks he's doing a good job.
I just saw this documentary that Morgan Freeman actually produced.
Prom Night in Mississippi.
Yes,
That's a great movie.
Yeah, it's really good. But you remember there was one father, his name was Glenn. Glenn, my name's Glenn, and you either like me or you don't. I hope you like me, but if you don't, well, I'm Glenn. And that's kind of that's kind of that Southern thing.
That's just it, though. I mean, it's almost like in some weird way, you conceive the character to be played by somebody who would be that bold.
Oh yeah, no, there's the rats and wrongs for nobody. All right, there's definitely that kind of attitude.
I wonder where that character came from, the set and the jaw.
I don't know. Those things just emerge, Just you're working on the dialogue, and something starts to take shape, and suddenly it lends to.
It lends it to that kind of characterization because that's a really kind of a bold thing to do. I mean, just sort of saying,
or
I'm
stupid. We'll find out.
But you couldn't have. I mean, you must have felt like, I know this guy and I know how to play it. I mean, when you saw this.
Yeah, it just felt right. So I grope my way through characters. I call it groping because I feel my way through it. But having done it for so long now, I can get there pretty quickly. And if it felt right, and if it feels right at this point, I don't argue with it. Unless someone tells me that it's out. No.
He's
if I don't get called off, I'll run with it.
His instincts, but the physicality of his character is, they're just right on. They're just right on. You just don't question
I'm a
them.
dancer.
I mean, but when you look, but if you look at Snatch, it's the same thing. All right, there's just this character and behavior that comes out, and that can't be written. The physiology to actually make the character come alive, and he's kind of a genius about that.
Yeah, but I've talked to you about this before. I asked you about that whole physical thing because it's almost like you figure out a way to play a guy physically, and stuff comes from that.
Yeah, for me, I'm not the most articulate of.
I would actually,
No, it comes from the
Jesse James. It was like that's a very physical performance, and it's about demeanor more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean,
fair enough.
Yeah, because that's a really reserved character who the world kind of comes to, and Aldo's the guy who kind of walks into a place,
chests his way in.
Yes, and this I'm here, pay attention will be paid kind of thing.
Yeah. Because, Quentin wrote this part for himself, and why he handed me at the last minute in the game, I'm most appreciative. But for 8 years,
nobody else is wondering why I did that, by the way.
Owning this thing because it's a gem. It's just it's a gem of a part.
Because I was fascinated by it. It's like this guy who really can't be anything else.
Oh, that's what it was. Is that he's right and wrong. There's a really strong code here, and he's sending a message, and he's trying to even out the playing field, which comes from his history. Which when you get into a Quentin Tarantino movie, and you get to embrace one of the characters, you soon learn that he's got backstory since the inception of the guy.
Well, you can't see the scar.
He will tell you. He will tell you.
No, I love doing stuff like that. And even when I end up, I might write big scenes or something that will never see the light of day as far as the story is concerned. But once I write it, it happened. It's history. And it's just it's just more informed. I just inform it, by talking to the actors about it and everything. And we can't say what happened, how the scar came about, but he knows.
I'll talk.
And I know.
I'll talk.
But it's him bringing you the backstory instead of you bringing it yourself, basically, right? I mean, it's a kind of return.
Man, this thing was a gift. It landed in my lap 6 weeks later. We're shooting. You don't want to change a thing. You don't. It's. I compare it to working with a Coen Brothers script because the dialogue is so spot on, and there's a music to it that if you take one step off the trail, you just muck up the whole thing, and so you stay on course. And it was so defined and laid out that I'm going to get a lot more credit for this one than I should.
Well, throw in the Mutual Admiration Society and bring it more down to earth. All right, yeah. But I do want to say. Well, I want to say one thing because he's very generous. But one of the things that was really great about working with him on this was, the character's right there. The character's right there on the page. But unless it's perfect casting, it's going to stay on the page. It'll never be as good as it is on the page unless the casting is moi. And that was the case here. But one of the things that was so cool is Brad got to know the character so well that very rarely was it a situation, as far as like directing him, where I'm telling him to do something, it was always posed as questions. It's like, okay, Aldo could do this and that would mean that, and he could do that and that would mean this. What do you think?
Well, you're good sending it off in another direction. Once you got one laid down, you throw something in there that sends it the other way.
But there was always questions I would pose Aldo, and and your answer would be the right answer.
What was one of those times a question you posed to him, and so I want to hear what that exchange was like?
Well, all right, well, one of the things that one of the biggest things in the movie, one of the biggest reactions in the movie he did was completely different from how I thought it would be. was his, not to go drastically into it, but his buongiorno.
But that's about language.
Yeah.
And one of the I think the great moves of this film is that every nationality that's portrayed in the film is true to their language, instead of the conceit that that everyone speaks English with some accent.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And so Germans are speaking German and
French speaking French.
French, and English for English, and that's more the world. That's the world where we live in now, and much more interesting as a viewer, I feel. And and so by the same thing, the joke of the of an American's lack of learning another language, and when they do, it's.
Because I wonder how you heard that in your head when you had written. Did you think that maybe he did speak some Italian?
Oh, well, I figured he understood it a little bit. I mean, he could speak it a little. I mean, he was in Sicily, all right, so it would make sense that he'd be able to get information across and this and that and the other. And, I can get around Germany by throwing a few words together. Having said that, though, in my mind, he pulled it off a little bit more. And then when he said it that way, it was at the script reading, and it killed. It just brought the whole. We had it was a 20-man script reading, all right, and it just brought the house down. And then after he said it, I was like, well, God, now I can't. Now you've ruined it for me. I can't hear it any other way. I don't have a choice. I have to do it that way now.
Now, did you always hear it like that when you saw the script? You thought this was going to be a guy who. This is the way.
But that's the thing.
It?
If you come from with any kind of Southern dialect, it's so hard to. It takes years to erase it in increments. So.
But it's also seemed to be too about what that.
It's true to form, really.
Yeah.
But what that.
It's very it's very organic, and it just actually shows what a dumb plan it is. What were these idiots thinking?
But you gotta take the shot. You gotta take the shot.
Exactly.
But I also seem to be about that thing. The thing they can do is that thing they do, which is to go into a room and kill everybody.
Yeah.
And when it comes to doing something else, I mean, they're completely out of their boathouse. That's how it plays for them. But that also seemed to be too about what that period would have been like for an American. I mean, Americans were sort of insistent on being American. The idea of learning another language just would have been like a weird thing anyway. I mean,
I think one of the things that's kind of fascinating with about the war itself. And one of the reasons I wanted to really make a big deal about language in it, and it's one of those nice, it's like kind of a metaphor, and it's actually a practical, what the movie is about, too. Look, World War II was the last time a whole bunch of white people fought a whole bunch of other white people. All right, so you have a situation that if you can pull off the lingo, if you can pull off the language, you could survive in an enemy territory. You could infiltrate a different army, whether it be Germans infiltrating Americans or Germans infiltrating the Czech resistance or people infiltrating the Germans. All right, that was a possibility because of that situation, but it depended solely on language. But even just survival, people's life in Europe at that time, could live or die by them understanding German. Do this. If you don't do it, you get shot and you get kicked off in the ditch if you didn't understand the order. And that happened all the time. And that's the thing that when they leave out of the other war movies, because in Where Eagles Dare, German is English, and apparently Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood speak German so magnificently great, all they have to do is put on a costume and they can hang out in the Generals Club. All right, and I just, to me, not only don't want to forget about the fact I don't buy it, all right, it's also the fact that it's like you've got possibly one of the most suspenseful sequences here, but you're pissing it away by English being German.
Because I wonder too, because you were talking about the international cast. I mean, it's a great group of actors, and it must have been kind of amazing to work with those guys.
Oh man, I'm telling you, we're taking notes on this one. August Steele, which we mentioned, Christoph Waltz, who one can. It's a fantastic role, but it took a fantastic actor to pull it off in all its incarnations, and who else? Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel Bruhl was born to play the role.
It's just
almost can't even imagine the movie without Daniel being that guy.
Michael Fassbender's a find. He's going to do some really good stuff. I'll tell you what was great was seeing this film with the German audience.
What was that like?
It was fantastic. I think they enjoyed it more than any audience, actually.
I can't imagine, actually, that screening will ever be duplicated again. There was something really special that happened that night. There was something German about. There was something a mood in the room. There's two things going on in particular, I think. One was the fact that the movie is filled with all these terrific German actors, and so there was this genuine pride, absolute pride of what was going on. Man, look at our guys, man. They're kicking
truly,
fucking ass.
I mean, they're usually relegated to national cinema because they're stuck in the language, and here, they're on the international forum and amazing performances. As good as anything anyone's doing.
But there was something else. This was the lightning in the bottle aspect.
History.
Was the fact that there was this moment in the film. Well, this as the movie's going on, at the beginning, we made a big point about. Most of the movie, it's Nazi, Nazi, Nazi. But in Aldo's speech at the beginning, it's the German will fear us, and we will do this to the German, we will do that to the German.
I did look around a couple times.
No, there's a moment where you're kind of cringing as you're sitting in a room full of Germans as it's going on. But you have to realize something. When it comes to World War II movies, Germans are used to cringing, all right? That is their constant state of being. They are used to watching these movies through the eyes of guilt, all right? And that is always how it is. Well, becomes this moment in the film where the laughs kind of start, and then they kind of keep going, and they keep going, and then all of a sudden you actually had a German audience thinking to themselves, wait a minute, I'm actually watching a World War II movie that I'm allowed to enjoy. I'm actually allowed to laugh at this. I'm actually allowed to enjoy this movie. I'm actually not looking through eyes of guilt. I'm actually into this story. And it ended up being a very liberating thing for the theater.
So you got to imagine you got a couple of generations that are living with the shame of their nation that they didn't have anything to do with. They were born into it, and they have to carry it in some way.
I mean, if anyone has bringing down the Third Reich fantasies, it's the last couple of generations of Germans. And just even looking at the reality of it, think about any of the German actors in my movie. Almost every single one of the males, man, they've put on a Nazi uniform before. If you're a German actor, at some point in time, you're going to play a Nazi, or a couple of them, or three of them, or five of them.
Except for Till.
Except for Till. This was the first time he actually put on a Nazi uniform because he knew he got to kill Nazis.
When we had the read-through, it was the German actors having the most fun on it. And again, I think it's because they got to tap dance on this thing they've been carrying around, and it felt the same. It felt the same thing through the screening.
One of the things I figure has got to appeal to you about this is that it's really an ensemble piece. I mean,
it's absolutely an ensemble piece, yeah.
And that the idea, I mean, because you've done a lot of that stuff that I think you're really great in these ensemble pieces, that you can sort of step back and realize it's got to be engaging for you to be a part of a cast and not just running the whole show or being dependent on the whole show.
I do like that about. I mean, you'll see right down to the day player. Everyone's got something going on in this, and and they have their own backstory too. And
Herman number 3 is good.
Herman number 3, but which is not usually the case. Usually the peripheral actors are sometimes there ungloriously to support who's ever in the close up. And there are people who make me laugh who are just there for one scene. It's really got something going on. Just great stuff. Now I forgot. I wandered off again.
No, but you're talking about the whole ensemble aspect of it, and that's the thing that everything.
Oh yes, but I'm not looking necessarily for either. It's just at the end of the day, it's most important to me the company you keep.
It's about the life experience.
Yeah, really.
But this is, I mean, you mean when you met with him, because I remember you were going over, you were saying, I'm going to see Brad in a couple days. What? I'm sorry, what?
That was just protocol. I was already in. Just an excuse to go to drink.
Well, one of the things that was actually funny is, I'm not friends with that many agents, but I'm actually friends with his agent, because his agent is also Uma Thurman's agent. I've known him for a long time. And I had another movie that I was thinking about Brad for, and then he was saying, no, Brad can't do it. And well, if I were just to meet him, no, I can't let you guys in the room together unless he can do it, because you guys are gonna fall in love and he can't do it, and so it's just gonna screw you guys both up. So just don't even get in the room until this relationship can happen.
Did you feel the same way too? That you wanted to wait until that moment you knew what you were gonna get?
Yeah, but it's also selfish reasons as well, because a Tarantino character, we all want to get one of those, and there's a lot of strong actors out there, and I don't think it's about I'm going to find something for us.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think it's if the two shall meet, then good for both of us.
Yeah. Look, it literally is a situation. If you'd asked me 3 years ago, would you like to work with Brad Pitt? I'd say, hell yeah, of course I would. But it don't work like that. It's got to be the character. As Bridget says, the fagua is the fagua. You know, the character is the character. And the thing is, why it is special when I work with the actors that I work is it is a meeting of actor and character. And so, you know, I want everyone to be a home run. And, you know, frankly, I created the character, so I'm really damn precious about it. And what will happen is, you know, I come up with a character and I think, oh, this is going to be perfect. Robert Forster would be wonderful.
It
Well,
was wonderful.
I don't have to guess. Am I going to get Robert Forster? I will probably get him if you know, unless he morally objects to the piece of material. I decide that I actually want Brad for this movie about halfway into the script. It's like my first actually start thinking about, well, who could play this character? All right, and I go, oh, well, Brad would be wonderful. So then I just keep writing, and then I'm like, okay, now I can't imagine anybody else but him. And okay, so not only is he the most in-demand dude, all right, you know,
For hillbillies.
yeah, out
For playing
there,
hillbillies.
And stoners.
And the thing is, you know,
Actually, no.
not only is he so in demand, you know, it also is like I don't even have the situation where I can wait for him. I need to go right away, all right, and like that's just a perfect storm of no. I thought. And so literally, I called up his agent. Well, like 3 weeks away from finishing the script. I go, look, here's the deal. I want to do this. I think this would be the perfect part for Brad. I think this is the one that we should do together. Okay, tell me the bad news. Because I had to figure he had 3 movies in advance, and then he goes, "No,
It don't work that way.
I know that's what I
clean.
admired. I
Keep it
mean,
so
I
clean.
admire that about you."
No, that's from experience. I learned because I'd stack them up, and by the time I got done with one, this thing that I'd signed up for a year ago was no longer of interest. Really, you know, you find yourself in a different place, and you have other interests, and it's better. The work's going to be better if you.
So it means you're really responding to things as they come to you.
You take them as they come, yeah. And you try to create your own things too, but.
You know, and it's also the thing where, you know, it's like, well, actually, the thing is where Brad's at in his career right now is, you know, he wants to work with talented artists that, you know, that stimulate him. Well, he's coming off of Terrence Malick, he's coming off the Coen brothers, he's coming off of David Fincher. Well, that sounds great. And then he's like, and actually, he's not booked up in advance, and actually, the sooner the better would be Brad's situation right now.
Daddy's got to work.
But obviously, your curiosity is aroused by people like Fincher and Terry Malick.
Yeah, I listen. At the end of the day, it's the director's medium. It starts with the director and ends with the director. He has the ultimate stamp on the story, and we get to go so far. But one, I'm savvy enough to know if I have the opportunity, I want to put myself in those hands. But also, I'm looking for someone with an interesting point of view and a strong voice, and you know, that certainly would sum up the man sitting to my left.
Well, he was very sweet when we had our big discussion about it, about the movie, because he didn't quite know about the ending. He had questions. He had a question. All right.
Yeah, absolutely, I did.
But the thing about the way he prefaced it was very funny. He goes, and so no, so we hadn't talked around it. We just eventually got to the point. All right, and we already liked each other. We were already libased a little bit. All right, had a little rosé in us, a couple balls. And so the question mark came. So he goes, so look, I have to ask you about the ending. Oh, by the way, I'm going to do it, so don't even worry about that. All right, so now about this ending. I'm in. So that's not a sales pitch.
No, then he was curious. Listen, I like a bit of history. I guess a little history buff.
But what's your question about the end, though?
Well, we're not actually.
We don't want to say it out loud, but there is a point in the movie where history went this way and we go another way.
We do have our way with history.
Yeah.
Is that true? Because it seemed all new to me. I didn't know this part of German history.
I'll tell you something. But what I did learn is that you were so well studied in the war, in all aspects of the war, and the characters and different sides and where they were at each point in the war. That it was all based, just like the languages itself and the use of language in the film.
And the language becomes a character.
That actually informed. Yeah, it was actually well researched. I found Quentin actually far more knowledgeable about the war than I did. And then to take those leaps, since it was based in reality, there felt like great room for it. My question was about tone, really. And it took me. I remember waking up about 3 weeks later and going, oh, I know what the bastard wants to do with this. I get this now. We're gonna have a good old time.
You know,
and it's that rewarding, you know.
And he was funny because he showed up on the set
without spoiling the visual. I mean, come on, come on.
He showed up on set. He goes, you know about the question I had? I've got the old-time religion on it now.
Inglorious Basterds, where even history gets bastardized.
Yeah, right.
I just feel like you're seeing something like that where it's also work, it's also intricate. You know, it's got to make you think, well, how's this going to play out? I want to be in this movie just to see how it plays out.
Well, I mean, to me, as far as like the structure of the piece is concerned, it's like it's structured around three characters. You know, the first chapter is the introduction of Londa. All right, the second chapter is the introduction of Aldo and the Bastards, and the third chapter is not the introduction of Shoshana, but setting her up. So they are our three lead characters, and they have three separate stories going on. Now, from chapter 4 to chapter 5, now it's the adventure film. And it just goes all the way, and the characters start overlapping, and this happens and that happens. But, you know, I am basically structuring the whole first half of the movie with a chapter each for my three leads. And then it's just watching them commingle.
You know, we're used to the normal screenplay, which works in 3 acts, and it's usually in succession of events, and they're all connected in some way. This worked more like a novel in the sense that it was 5 distinct chapters, and one chapter would immensely focus on the detail of a moment, and draw and let that moment breathe, and study it, and then we would jump through time. There'd be big gaps in time. We move on to the next section. It was like when a painter paints just the bends in a figure, but when it's all together, the whole figure is there, and I was really intrigued that it could work in that kind of structure.
Because that whole sort of time thing, you almost find yourself wondering what happened to these people, because time, there are these big gaps that you talk about.
Well, like for instance, in the case of Shoshana's character, in the script, I wrote a sequence that I didn't put in the movie that lays out a little bit more how she got involved with the cinema and gives you an idea how she survived from 1941 to 1944. Because I felt in the script you needed it, or else you'd be, well, what happened? How did this happen? But in the movie, I felt you didn't need it. You know, there's certain things you just don't need when it comes to storytelling, when you're dealing with pictures as opposed to words. And then not only did I not feel that we needed it, I don't even want to include any of that scene, even though it was a very good scene. I don't want to include any of it on the DVD or in anything on it anymore, for the simple fact that I don't want the audience to know what happened to her from 1941 to 1944. I want you to decide. That's like a whole other movie. And if I can't show the whole movie, I don't even want to show a scene of it. I want the audience to figure out how she survived. How did she get this cinema?
But if there's a thing that we come to expect in the Quentin Tarantino movie, it's that things aren't over-explained. You know that thing you get in a movie, somebody says, this is who I am, this is what I'm going to do, then they do it, and then at the end of the movie they say, this is who I am, this is what I did.
Yeah.
Knock it out.
Yeah.
Hits a car window.
Or they have the whole movie where, like, there's a secondary character throughout the whole film, and the only reason he's there is for the hero to explain to the audience via him everything that they're doing.
And that's the one thing that you work pretty rigorously to avoid.
Yeah.
And I got to figure that's got to be really attractive to you, too, to know that these people are going to be who they are in the moment, and we have to live with them as an audience. And that it's not over-explained.
When do you see 11-minute, 15-minute scenes sustain themselves like this? What's the longest scene in this film?
Probably the tavern. I would say the tavern, probably.
How long?
It's about 30 minutes.
But that kind of detail, I mean, it humanizes the whole kit and caboodle.
But it's all built on what's happening in that moment.
Use that word.
A lot of metaphor mixing here, but that's okay. But it's that thing about living in the moment, which is so much what your movies are, about things happening at that time, and that those details you're talking about build to those moments.
Well, I mean, I think there's an integrity in my work that you don't have expositional kind of stuff. And now as a writer, you do actually need to explain a few things. And so part of my plan, my method, is to bury it in so much minutia about nothing that you don't realize you're being told an important plot point until it becomes important. The few times that I actually did have to do it in this movie, because you know what? There was an aspect about making an adventure film. At a couple of times, I actually had to explain the plot a little bit to get you to the next point. And in both of those cases, which is like the Mike Myers scene and then the scene in the vet, I'm almost doing a parody on exposition scenes. Okay, no, we are copying that this is an exposition scene, and we're gonna do a great one, but it is an exposition scene.
Was that a concern of yours too? Because it's a lot to take. It's a lot to take in with all the dramatic stuff that's going on.
I think if you're gonna go to Nebraska, you got to go all the way.
I should go with Kit and Caboodle. I mean, you can do a whole book of these things at this point.
I'm in my.
He's starting to channel Aldo a little bit, all right.
My country themes.
But since you're talking about all this, what do you guys say when people ask you what the movie's about? I mean, what do you say?
I actually loved it when you were on the Charlie Rose show about Benjamin Button, and Charlie Rose goes, "So I hear you're doing a movie about World War II." Well, it takes place during World War II. I don't know if it's necessarily about World War II.
It's fair. To me, it's the cap on the Nazi focused film. It's just to end all films.
Yeah.
Where else are you gonna go?
That's one of the things that that's one of the things that Christoph said. He goes, "I think Quentin has killed the German Nazi film for all time."
Seal it, done.
And that's a good place then. And now we're done.
All right.
Thanks, mate.